أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي آمين يا رب العالمين. Assalamu alaikum everyone. I hope all of you are doing great. Today inshallah we are going to study a few points about al, which we all know by now is the Arabic equivalent of the English article the. So let's begin with al, which we have already familiarized ourselves with in the previous lesson, in which we studied the different types of statuses that an ism can have. So an ism can either be marfa or it can be nakra, and adding the prefix of al to an ism is one of the 7 ways in which an ism can be made marfa. Alright, so we need to study a couple of points about al, and that's what inshallah we're going to study here in this lesson. Okay, now before we proceed, we first need to dissect this prefix. Okay, so as you can see, we have al written over here, and this little thing here is actually your hamza, and this hamza has a special name, and it's called hamzatul wasl. All right, I would want you to memorize this term. Okay, hamzatul wasl, or simply the joining hamza. We will talk about this hamzatul wasl in this lesson. Okay, just remember its name, hamzatul wasl. That's all you need to know about it. Okay, and the second thing we see here is your lam with sukoon. This lam is called lam-e tarif. Lam-e tarif. All right, and once again, these are the only two terminologies that I want you to remember for al. Okay, hamzatul wasl and lam-e tarif. All right, now let's begin with our first point. It says that al cannot coexist with tanween. This point is something that we have already studied a number of times. Okay, so what's tanween? It's the double harkat, and it signifies that an ism is nakra. So logically, we can of course say and think and tell that al obviously cannot ever coexist with a tanween, because tanween shows that an ism is nakra while al shows that an ism is marfa, and we all know that there is no such thing as a book or the book, right? So we all know that a book is either going to be a book or the book. Never ever can it be the book. Therefore, al, which is the sign of marfa, cannot ever coexist with tanween, which is the sign of being nakra. Okay, so this is something that we have already established quite a number of times. Next point. No post tanween alif in nasab form. Post tanween alif. We studied this in the previous lesson, and it is actually the alif right after tanween in nasab form. This is written, this is only written, alright, it doesn't really get pronounced, doesn't have any sound, so it is something that we take care of while writing Arabic. Okay, and this post tanween alif, the word post is a prefix and it means after. Okay, so this after tanween alif or post tanween alif in nasab form gets off when we add al to it. Okay, so Musliman, you can see this post tanween alif is present, but whenever you add al to this nasab form, it loses its tanween as well as its post tanween alif, as you can see here. Okay, that's our second point. Next point. Okay, now this is quite obvious, because have you ever heard of anybody say, where is the Zaid, or where is the Fatima? No. Where is the America, for example? No, right? Why not? Because proper nouns do not get added with the. All right, and very very few exceptions are there, but generally no, you don't do that. Similarly, in Arabic, you do not add al with any ism alam, which is the equivalent of proper noun. All right, and however, there are cases where you might find some ism alam or some asma alam with al. Okay, and that is only because the Arabs have decided that an al is going to be prefixed with those asma. All right, and this is something that comes with the reading. All right, and you're going to spot it right on when you see it. Okay, you don't really need any kind of vocabulary to memorize this point. it is quite obvious, but this is just a little exception that unless the Arabs tell you to add this al to an ism alam, you don't do it. Okay, so this was our point about not adding al with ism alam unless the Arabs have said so. Alright, next. Remember we did types of ism previously, and we saw that an ism can be divided into 3 types based on whether it carries a tanween or not, and whether its rafa, nasab and jar forms are similar to each other or not. Okay, so we studied munsarif asma that carry a tanween and their rafa, nasab, jar forms are different from each other. Then we also studied the ghair munsarif asma, the ones that have no tanween and that have their nasab and jar forms similar, but their rafa form is different from the nasab and jar forms. All right, and then we study the mabni asma, which are your identical triplets. Okay, haza haza haza, for example. So this point is about ghair munsarif asma. Now the rafa form, for example, we have the word masajidu. Okay, this is the rafa form, and the nasab form is masajida, and the jar form is also masajida. Okay, however, if we add an al to this jar form of masajida, it does accept a kasra or a zir in its marfa form, in its al form. Alright, so it's masajidu, masajida, masajida, nakra form, and then you add al, it becomes al masajidu, al masajida, al masajidi. Alright, that's what happens. Okay, next point, once again quite logical. Okay, so before we begin with the Arabic example, let's study an analogy. So there are 2 sentences written here. The first one says the teenagers are sitting there, and the second sentence is the teenagers are a misunderstood lot. Okay, if I were to omit these 2 sentences, these 2 parts, and you're left with only the teenagers, you wouldn't really know if it's referring to some special group or the entire species, all the teenagers in existence. All right, and that is something that we can only tell by the context, by the full sentence, right? So if I say that the teenagers are sitting there, then we can, through this context, tell that it's some teenagers that are being talked about. While if we study this sentence, it says the teenagers are a misunderstood lot. Then here we can obviously, through this context, tell that it's the, all the teenagers in existence that are being talked about. Okay, so this is the concept. Now let's see what I've written here. Context tells us, this context is actually your keyword here. Okay, so context tells us if al refers to an individual ism or the entire species of that ism in existence. All right, so is it one or some special teenagers or all the teenagers in existence? For example, let's come to the Arabic example now. We have al-baqaratu, the cow. Now, until and unless we know what or how this word is being used, so that means that until and unless we know the context in which this word al-baqaratu has been used, we cannot tell if the reference has been made to an individual, some special cow, or the entire species of cows. All right, so for example, we say Suratul Baqarah, that's actually al-baqaratu, right? So what do we see? That's only the name. All right, so we know by the context that it is actually referring to some special cow that was talked about in the surah, right? However, if used some other way, all right, of course it could mean the entire species of cows. All right, once again, this is something that can only be told by the context, and this is quite obvious. Just as you worked this thing out, you are going to work out, inshallah, when such situations arrive in Arabic. All right, so remember this. Okay, Now, the next 3 points are about the fact that in every language, some rules have been made to facilitate an easy and a smooth flow of speech. All right, so for example, in English, we have it is, which got contracted, or actually which gets contracted to its. Similarly, kind of, that gets contracted to kinda. Similarly, want to becomes wanna. All right. Similarly, gonna, which was actually going to. All right. So all these things are your contractions, and what are they doing there? How did we get landed with them? Only in order to facilitate or enable a smooth flow of speech. That is it. Okay. With respect to this point or this fact in mind, remember that Arabic is no different, and in Arabic grammar, in fact, many rules have been devised that enable this smooth flow of speech. All right, and now let's study these few points. First of all, the Lam Tarif is vocalized if al is before a Qamari letter. Okay, what are Qamari letters? We are going to study them in the next lesson, inshallah. Okay, so you don't need to worry much about it. Simply remember that at times you are going to vocalize Islamic Tarif, as in the word al-Qamaru, while in some other words you are going to silence this Lam Tarif. Okay, and once again, what those Shamsi letters are and what those situations are where we're going to silence these the Islamic Tarif, we are going to study in the next lesson, inshallah. Okay, simply remember at this stage that some words in Arabic are those that in which we have to vocalize this Lam Tarif, such as al-Qamaru, and there are some letters or there are some words in Arabic where we have to silence this Lam Tarif. Why do we have to do it? Because it is easier to say assalamu than saying al-salamu. That is it. Okay, that's the only reason. The same concept applies to this point. The Hamzatul Wasl is silenced when joining with the previous word. Okay, just tell me if you find it easier to say Zalika al-Kitabu. No, you don't, right? So Zalika al-Kitabu is much easier to say than saying Zalika al-Kitabu, right? What's happening? We have stopped vocalizing this Hamzatul Wasl's sound. All right, it was actually Zalika al-Kitabu, but for a smooth flow of speech, we have silenced this Hamzatul Wasl. Therefore, the last mutaharrik letter gets joined with the next letter that has Sakoon in it. Okay, let's see it again. Mutaharrik simply means a letter that carries a harkat. Okay, so Zalika. What's the last mutaharrik letter? It's Ka. Okay, and what's the first letter that has Sakoon in it in the next word? It's Lam, Lam Tarif. All right, and we can easily join them, right? So Zalik Kal Kitabu. That is it. And we have silenced this Hamzatul Wasl because it's easier to say Zalik al Kitabu than saying Zalika al Kitabu. That's it. Alright, so we are done with the 8 points about al, and I hope that you have understood them all. Now, these are quite a few points, and the only points that I would want you to remember from this lesson are first this one, alright, and this one, and this one, alright. Why? Because these are the points that I would that are not going to be repeated perhaps in the next lessons. However, these 2 points, since they are quite obvious and they don't require any grammatical rule, they just need your judgment and common sense. That's why I don't want you to remember these points. Just know these points, but you don't have to memorize these points, okay? It just comes with common sense. That's it. All right, and since we have to study these 2 points in detail. In the next lesson, I would want you to not bombard with, the information presented here. Just know these things, that at times you are going to vocalize the Islamic tarif, while at other times you are going to silence it. All right. And this is something that you know already, so don't worry about it. So in essence, just remember 3 points: this one, and this one. That is it. Okay, so I hope that this is clear, and inshallah we are going to study some conversions in the next lesson about how to make the marfa form by al. All right, so we are going to practice quite a few nouns over there. So till that lesson, inshallah, remember these points and practice the rafa nasab and jar forms. All right, I'll see you in the next lesson. Allah Hafiz. Barakallahu li wa lakum fil Qur'anil Hakim.